Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be doing my level 80 overview of Scholar. Now, when Scholar first got released into Shadowbringers, I was really disappointed at what they did with the job, because first of all, we lost a lot of DPS tools, I guess you could say. Not so much the DPS output of Scholar, because that is still pretty good, but the way in how you deal that damage got reduced from having a lot of actions to very few of them. But when you look at the bigger picture, all of the healers have had their DPS tools made more uniform, so that if you switch in between these different healers, you kind of already know what you're going to be paying attention to. So when we go over the DPS actions for Scholar, you'll see that they're pretty much the same as the other two healers. Now, one thing that I do have to say is that with the raid patch, we got energy drain back, which is really good, because that was one of my major complaints when it came to like job design. Not having energy drain was a pretty big downside to Scholar in my opinion, because of how the Aetherflow mechanic works. So that's kind of like my initial thoughts on how it was in Shadowbringers. I do think that having played it a little bit more now, it is a lot more fun. I'm still a bit sad about losing the different DPS tools, but it does make it so that it's more in line with the other healers when it does come to DPS. Now, the two big mechanics around Scholar are its Aetherflow ability and the pets. You can choose in between one of two summons. I'm just gonna summon one of my pets. Which one you choose does not matter. Back in Stormblood and previously, you had to make a choice in between Eos or Selene, depending on what you wanted from your pet, as they had different abilities. But now it's purely just for glamour purposes, I guess you could say. Eos looks like this, and then when you summon Selene, she just looks a bit different. But other than just the look of your fairy, it doesn't matter, just pick the one that you like the most. And then of course, second of all, we have Aetherflow, but you can't use this out of combat anymore, which is really good because this usually forced you to have like a 45-second downtime in between pulls. So now you don't have to wait on Aetherflow anymore after you've wiped during a raid or something like that. So that's really good. Now, let's go over the DPS tools real quick. As I mentioned, they're a lot more streamlined now. First of all, we have Broil 3. This is our spammable single target attack. Unique to Scholar is that we have Ruin 2, which is an instant cast single target attack. So this is really good for movement or when you have to weave some of your off-global cooldowns. Then for a dot we have Biolysis, also lasts 30 seconds just like with the other healers. And then for AoE we have Art of War. Point blank AoE around yourself, also instant cast, so it does allow for you to weave stuff. Now, since I'm in combat, I can use my ability Aetherflow. This will give me 3 Aetherflow stacks, which are these over here, and will also grant me 1000 MP. But what we can do with these Aetherflow stacks I will talk about in just a bit. Now, again, for DPS we also have a raid utility, which is called Chain Stratagem. You put this on the target, and then for the duration of 15 seconds, people have an increased critical hit rate on that target. So this synergizes really well with other crit buffs and such, of course. It is crit rate, not crit damage. So yeah, that is that. That's what we have for our DPS. For the most part, we still have energy drain, but I'll talk about that when we talk about Aetherflow. So when it comes to GCD healing, Scholar is the only healer that only has weak heals, I guess you could say, when it comes to their GCDs, or they have to supplement it with some of their cooldowns in order to make their GCD heals more powerful. So when it comes to single target, we only have Physic, well, for like a normal heal at least. This is kind of like comparable to Cure and Benefic, but Scholar does not have a Physic 2, if you compare it to like Astro and White Mage. They have Cure 2 or Benefic 2. Scholar doesn't have that, so when it comes to single target spammable healing, they only have a weak heal that they can spam. Now, of course, this is supplemented with the fact that your fairy will also constantly heal the lowest target in your group with Embrace, but it is a very weak single target heal that your fairy puts out. But it is still kind of like a heal over time that you will have on your party, so that's pretty good. For AoE healing, we have Succor. This will do a heal as well as a shield. Again, the problem is that's your only AoE heal that you can spam. So when you are spamming this, you're only getting half of the value back, because it is a 180 potency heal and a 180 potency shield. Oh no, it's like a 200 potency shield or something like that. It's a bit more. But basically, when people already have the shield attached to them, they're only going to get the 180 potency heal, which is not that much. So again, when it comes to spamming AoE healing, Scholar is the worst, as they will always have this shield attached to their AoE heal. Then, last but not least, we have one final single target heal that we can do, which is Adloquium. This is again a heal and a shield. When this ability crits, you get a double shield. So this is to nerf one of your other abilities, which is called Deployment Tactics, because back in Stormblood and Heavensward, when Scholar would crit an Adloquium, you would get a gigantic shield, because it would double the shield's potency, which was one of like their special abilities. But it made it so that you could technically cheese through mechanics by having a crit low. Now, of course, back then you had to fish for crit lows, because you do not have a 100% crit rate on a Lokium, of course. But with the added addition of Recitation, we can now force a critical hit on the Adlo. So because of that, crit Adlo had to be nerfed slightly when it comes to spreading the effect. So that's why when you do get a crit Adlo, I'm going to see if I can get one here, you now get 2 shields instead of just the 1. And it doesn't look like it wants to crit. Oh, there we go, just crit. So as you can see, I have now Galvanize, which is the normal Adlo shield, and I have Catalyze, which is the double shield that you get from the Adloquium. So that's all we have for our single target heals. Now, as I said, we do have some tools that interact with these. So first of all, Deployment Tactics. This will grant the shields that you have or a party member to everybody else in a small radius around you. So this is why Crit Adlo got nerfed, because now it only spreads the Galvanize effect, not the Catalyze effect, so that you only get the strength of the Adlo and not of the full Crit Adlo as you would before. Other than that, we also have Emergency Tactics. This is a very short cooldown, so this kind of helps you with AoE spam healing. And when you use it, as you can see when I use my Adloquium, I'm just going to get 2 heals instead of a heal and a shield. So this basically transforms the shielding effect of either your Sucker or your Adlo into an extra add-on heal. So this is kind of what you need to use when you need it just for healing, these 2 abilities, and not for shielding. So that's a really good addition. Now, when it comes to forcing crits and such, we have Recitation. When we use this, the next ability that we use will cost no mana or no stacks. This also works with your Aetherflow, and it will force a crit. So if I do an Adlo now, you're gonna see I get the 2 shields because it was a guaranteed crit, and it cost me no mana. If I were to use this on an Aetherflow ability, the Aetherflow ability would crit, and it would cost me no stacks. And that's pretty much what we have for our GCD stuff. Now, when we look at our off GCD healing, most of this is going to come from our Aetherflow stacks. So we have 4 abilities that we can spend our Aetherflow on. Lustrate is a single target heal. This is the weakest action that you can spend your Aetherflow on, but in certain scenarios when your tank is too low and they're about to take a tank buster, you can just quickly use a Lustrate on them to heal them. We have Excock. This is the better version of Lustrate. This applies a 45-second buff on a target, and when they drop below 50% HP, they will get the heal received from this. So this is really good to put on your tank or on a party member that you know is going to take a lot of damage, so that you won't have to worry about healing them after the fact for something like that. Now, do keep in mind that this does not save people from dying to insta-kill mechanics or something. So for example, say your tank is at 60,000 HP, but they need to drop below 50,000 for Excock to proc. If they take a tank buster which hits them for 70,000, meaning that they get overkilled by 10,000 HP, the Excock won't magically save them. And as you can see, when the effect runs out, it just automatically triggers. So if your tank is gonna die from the tank buster, Excock won't save you, but if your tank lives through the tank buster, then they'll immediately get healed for a pretty big portion of their HP. So Excock is really good for that. A scenario where Excock shines is when there are multiple instances of damage going out at about the same time. A very good example of that would be Garuda in the Weapons Refrain Ultimate. Somewhere towards the final phase of Garuda, your main tank takes a tank buster, and there's also 2 AoEs going out at like a second apart from each other. So if you need to heal your main tank there, it is pretty tight on the timing, but if you just put an X-Cock on your tank, it'll automatically trigger during the tank buster, if they survive of course, and then they will be healed to not die to the follow-up auto attacks or the 2 AoEs that are going off at the same time. So X-Cock, stellar ability, it's really good. Then when it comes to AoE healing, we have 2 abilities. We have Indomitability, or Indom for short. This is just a burst AoE heal instantly, so when you have to heal up your party but you don't have the time to actually put in a GCD heal, you can use this, really strong. I'm going to use my Aetherflow again to get more stacks. And then secondly, we have Sacred Soil. This has 2 properties to it. First of all, everybody that's inside the Sacred Soil will take 10% less damage, so it's really good for mitigation. But other than that, it will also put a regen effect on everybody that's in there. As you can see, I was sticking, getting some healing on me as long as I'm standing in there. Now, the way it works out is Sacred Soil heals more than Indom, but of course Sacred Soil does its heal over time. So when you need to burst heal, you use Indom. When you know that there's enough time for the party to survive and then slowly regen over time, you want to use Sacred Soil. Or you can use a combination of both. Like you can use Sacred Soil to mitigate the hit, then use Indom right after, for when there's a second hit, for example, then the second hit happens, and then you just let the Sacred Soul regen do its thing. Of course, the regen only applies to people inside the bubble, so once they leave the bubble, the regen will go away as well. So they need to stay inside the bubble for the effect to stay active. And then, of course, last but not least, we got back one of our abilities that I missed the most, which is Energy Drain. This is both a DPS utility as well as a mana utility, as it will give you 500 MP back when you use it. And this is just really good to throw away extra stacks that you might have. Because the problem was, when we did not have this ability, you basically could sometimes be stuck with like 1 or 2 extra stacks of Aetherflow, because you have so many different abilities to heal as a scholar. You would sometimes just have leftover stacks and you couldn't really use them on anything, so either you would not use Aetherflow and be left over with stacks, or you would use your Aetherflow stacks on Lustrix, for example, just to use the stacks, or you would use Aetherflow again when you still had 2 stacks left or something like that. So it felt really bad, and that was one of my major complaints with Scholar. But since we now have Energy Drain back, you can just spend all of your leftover stacks on the Energy Drain. Now, I'm going to show you real quick again. If I use Recitation, and then for example Indom, you can see Indom crit and I still have my 3 stacks. You can also use Recitation when you have 0 stacks and still use one of your like Aetherflow abilities. So, as you can see, when we were using all of our Aetherflow abilities, this gauge right here started filling. So I'm going to use an Energy Drain, let's take an X-Cog and then a Lustrate or something. So as you can see, every time that we use one of our Aetherflow abilities, this can be Energy Drain, this can be a healing ability, can be anything, you're granted 10 gauge. Now this is your fairy gauge, and you can do a few things with this. So first of all, we have a single target heal over time, which is called Fey Union. As you can see, the fairy is tethering me. I am granted a heal over time, and every time that it ticks, you'll see that I lose gauge on my bar. So I'm going to press it again to cancel it. This is pretty good to put on a tank for auto attacks, stuff like that, or during a time where you're more focused on healing the party, but the tank also needs healing, of course, so you can just put it on the tank like that. Pretty good. Second thing that we can spend this on is called Fey Blessing. This is a AoE heal, and it's a pretty decent one. It's not as strong as X-Cock. It's about, I think, 60, not X-Cock, Indom. It's about 60% as strong as it is. But it is just something that you can spend your fairy gauge on. So for example, say you're in a fight where the party is taking the most damage and the auto attacks that the tank card is taking is not as punishing. You can just spend your gauge on Fey Blessing instead of on Fey Union, which is the tether on the tank. Of course, this is on a 60-second cooldown, so you can't spam this to get rid of your gauge as much. or for like continuous healing on the party. So you can use this once every 60 seconds or something like that to just keep your party healthy. And then the rest of the gates you can spend on Aether Pact to help your tank out. Now your fairy still has 2 other abilities, one of which is Whispering Dawn. This is a heal over time on the party. This is really strong actually, it's a really strong regen. It heals for quite a lot, but again, it is a heal that comes over 20 seconds of time. So you do need to make sure that your party has the amount of time required to heal up all of this damage, because otherwise you'll need to use something like your Indom, for example, to make sure your party doesn't die. Second of all, we also have Fey Illumination. This will do 2 things for you. First of all, it'll make so that I think it's a 10% damage reduction. I'm gonna check real quick. Yeah, your party takes 10% reduced magic damage, so the magic damage is really important here. But you and all of the other party members will also... Wait. Oh, no, I'm reading it wrong. It's increased healing for everybody by 10%, and everybody else also takes 5% reduced magic damage. So if you look at White Mage and Astro, they have a heal buff which grants them 20% increased healing. Scholar also has that in the form of Dissipation, but we'll talk about that in just a sec. But this basically makes it so that both you and your partner get 10% heal increase, which equals to the 10% that the other 2 healers have technically. So this is more of a, we're going to reduce the damage that party takes by a little bit, and we're going to increase the healing that both you and your other healer do by 10% as well. So it's a pretty good ability to use. Not super strong because it's only 5% magic damage mitigated instead of something like 10%, which is from White Mage if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's still pretty good to use, but it's mainly just for the healing potency up. So you can use this during a time where a lot of healing is required, so that you can use the 5% mitigation and also take use of the 10% heal buff for both you and your partner. Now, as I quickly touched on, we also have an ability called Dissipation. This is our 20% personal heal buff, but it will also do 2 other things. First of all, it'll grant you full stacks of Aetherflow. As you can see, I have no Aetherflow stacks. I'm going to use this, and I have now full Aetherflow stacks. I am now granted a 20% heal buff for 30 seconds, but the downside of this, as you can see, my pet is gone. So as long as you have the Dissipation buff on you, which you can't click away by the way, your pet will not be active. So when you use Dissipation, make sure that you don't have Fey Illumination or Whispering Dawn that you want to be using, because you can't. Because as long as your pet is gone, you can't use these abilities. And then as soon as Dissipation disappears, your fairy appears again. Now, there's one last thing that we can do with our fairy, which is we can transform her into a Seraph. Now, the Seraph does 2 things for you. First of all, the embrace that your normal fairy does is pretty weak. The embrace that your Seraph does is pretty strong. Now, I'm not going to be able to show that because... Oh wait, actually I can show that. But I'm going to need to get out of combat real quick and do a quick switcheroo to get my HP low. I'm going to switch to a craft real quick, if it will allow me. There we go. So, and then need mana to hit the dummy. There we go. Then I'm going to summon my fairy. Now, as you can see, the fairy is going to embrace me for 3000 heal. About 3000 heal. It's not too strong, but when I summon my Seraph, it's a 4000 heal plus a shield. So it's going to be a decent heal, which is already stronger, and on top of that, it's also going to shield me for just as much, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to check real quick. Yes, so it is a 200 potency heal plus shield. So where your normal fairy is doing about like a 3000 heal, that's it. Your Seraph is doing a 4000 heal and a 4000 shield, which is a lot stronger. And then when the duration runs out, your normal pet will come back. Now, other than this, we also have Constellation that we can use, which is an AoE version of the single target heal that I just got. It's a bit weaker than the single target heal, but it is still a heal on the whole party and a shield on the whole party. And the good thing about Constellation is the fact that it stacks with other shields. So when I, for example, say I use my Recitation, I use my Adloquium, I I get the buff, I spread the buff, the whole party now has a strong shield. I then use Consolation, the Seraph uses her shield as well on the whole party, then now my party will have 2 shields. Say that you stack this up with a Nocturnal Astro in neutral sect, you're going to have 3 shields, because you'll have the spread out low, you'll have the Consolation, and you'll have the neutral sect shields from your Astro. Now I'll wait 30 seconds to summon my Seraph again, and then I can show you how those shields stack, of course. Now, one last thing to note is that your Whispering Dawn and Fey Illumination are also available when you have the Seraph summoned. They do have different names, they're called Angel's Whisper and Seraphic Illumination, but the effect and the cooldown on them is exactly the same. So summoning your Seraph does not interrupt you using either of these. Of course, if you use them during the normal fairy, they'll still be on cooldown when you go into the Seraph. When you use it during Seraph, they are on cooldown for your normal fairy. So I'm gonna summon my Seraph again. We have now 20 seconds to use her. So I use Consolation 1, and this will give me the shield and a small heal. And then I can use it again. It's on a 20-second cooldown and it can have 2 charges, meaning that you can always use 2 charges of this when the Seraph is active. As you can see, I use my Whispering Dawn, the Angel's Whisper, and my Whispering Dawn is still on cooldown. The Angel's Whisper and the Angelic Illumination, or whatever it was called, are the exact same when it comes to what they do for you. So it's not like using Angel's Whisper is stronger than Whispering Dawn. It's just a different name because it comes from your Seraph. So I guess they just had to give it a different name for that reason. But with that, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover about Scholar. It's a pretty strong healer. We did lose some things in our DPS toolkit when it comes to the way we deal damage, but Scholar still boasts a lot of damage and also a lot of healing. It's one of the healers that probably has the biggest of GCD heal toolkit. When it comes to their GCD healing, it is a bit scuffed compared to the other 2 healers. But it is more made up for the fact that we have so many off-global cooldown abilities that we can make use of. So Scholar is probably the hardest healer to pick up when it comes to learning how to heal, but it's definitely worth your investment in time, as it feels really good just going through a boss fight and never having to use your GCD heals or having to use them very few times. So Scholar, definitely worth picking up, definitely worth trying out. Is quickly becoming my favorite healer again that I've played so much Astro with all of the cards, which it's starting to get a bit, well, I'm starting to get used to it, I guess. But yeah, Scholar is definitely a great healer, definitely recommend people to try it out. And yeah, with that being said, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.